Okay guys, so in the last video we talked about the CSS box model, and some examples that I gave is margin, which is the space outside an element. I also talked about padding, which is literally the opposite. It is the space inside an element. And then I talked about borders, which is the edges around an element. And I talked about the width, which is the horizontal size of an element, and I talked about the height, which is the vertical size of an element. I also talked about something else, how to apply a certain effect to your button in a website, such as when you hover on the button it changes color, and when you click on it it changes to another color. Display properties. What does that mean? Now, the display properties of the CSS, it specifies the display behavior of an element. Basically, the display behavior of an element. There are exactly 6 types of display properties, even though I didn't write one here. So the first one is the display block property. This one, it just shows a block element. That means, in other words, the element occupies the whole space. It occupies the whole space of an element. So this is the element right here. It occupies the whole space. That is the display block. Then we have the display inline, which is basically like this. And then we now have the inline. Basically just means it takes the space off the exact height, width, and basically everything that has to do with the size of a particular element, and it just maintains that space. Then we now have the inline block. The inline block is just like the inline, except we can tweak how we want it to be. We can make it bigger in size. We can extend it to whatever length we want it to extend to. So that is just the inline. Then we have the none. The none basically is just, it still exists, but it's not visible. We can't see it with our own naked eyes. It is not visible at all. Now we have the flex. Now this flex, let me come back. This flex, it displays an element as a block level flex counter. This places all elements inside, side by side. So what does that mean? It means right here, it's, let me see if I can show you that. So it's basically is like this. This is the flex right here. It takes all of this flex. It's basically like, it's like an inline block. Yes, it's like an inline block because it does like inline. You can manipulate how the sizes or the gaps between each of them will be. But this position was done due to another set of lines of code that was written to position it this way. But originally it would have been side by side. They would have been, this one comes here, but they'll be close to each other. Now we now have the grid. The grid, display grid. It's basically like the flex, except this one, it considers the spaces in between, and you can tweak it a little more code to make it look exactly the way it looks like. That is, it arranges them in a certain way depending on how many elements there are, and once it reaches the end, that's it. It's not going to show any other information. Okay, that is all for the display properties. But before I go out of the display properties, let me show you what code made this flex and this grid possible before I move into what else we learned today. So all this, see, this is the code. I put it inside a div element and then created all these other multiple divs, wrote down all of this. Same thing with the grid. I gave the div, the first div, its own class attribute respectively. That is what I did. And yeah, that's basically it. That's for the HTML. Now in the CSS, first in the CSS we have 2. This is the HTML right now. So the 2 class attributes and the 3 class attributes is basically what we're going to be dealing with in the CSS. So now in the CSS, if you go right at the beginning, there's a place where it was written. It was meant to show. It was meant to show. Why isn't it showing? Oh, sorry. The 5 CSS. I was in the assignment. Sorry. So if you go down, you will see this is the code, lines of code. So display flex, it basically displays the flex and stacks it side by side without these spaces here. Then this is the flex, by the way. So let me scroll down. This is the flex right here. So now how do we make it like this? We imputed this first of all, we added these gaps to give these spaces that is in between all of them, these spaces here. Then we now justified the content, justify hyphen content line of code to be centralized, which basically shifts every single one of them to the center, and we justified it to be center so that both on the X and Y it goes like this, and then we align the items right at the center, so both on the X and Y axis it is at the center. That is why it turned to be like this. So let me see. I've commented that out entirely, so basically there is nothing that was affected here. Let me see if I refresh. So it just took it to the bottom, so that means the justify, let me comment this one out to control / and I commented it out. I'm going to refresh. Now this is exactly how it looks like, because it was before I display the flex. Let me also control / this so that the thing can be go back to how it originally was. So when we first of all introduced the flex property, okay, let me see if I can just come right here, control / and then control / so that everything will be commented out, and then control / and then refresh. Now this is exactly how I think this affected the grid too. I don't know why it affected the grid, but yeah, basically this is just what it's meant to be like. Oh yeah, so let me click on this, control / then refresh. It's meant to, let me do control / let me come here, control / come here, control / I'm trying to comment all of them out properly, but I've forgotten how to do that. So yeah, so now I'm going to refresh all of this. So now this is all commented out. That means they're not really doing anything. So the grid is just like this. This is it without any display property. So when I just add it right there, I think the border is being showed, so it just extends the whole screen. Now if I cancel, let's reverse it, control / come here and control /. Now the display flex would instantly become like this. Exactly, it stacks side by side. This is how it is originally. Now how did I apply the spaces in between? By writing this code. Now control / that is gap 20 pixels. Now refresh. Now there's spaces in between. Now this next one, let's see what it does. Control / and then refresh. It takes it to the center of the website, and then let's see the align. Control / then refresh. Doesn't really do much. There's not much of a change right now. And then we now have the height. Control / the height is 100 display value height. That is basically just means the whole size of the entire screen, So I'm going to refresh, and it automatically took it to the center. Now come here. I think this is the code that stacks them on top instead of side by side. So control /, which is column reverse. So I'm going to refresh, and it basically takes it back to this and reverses what was at the beginning basically to the bottom, and the bottom to the top. So, and the first shall become the last basically. So now that is for the flex. Now for the grid, when you enable the grid, this is exactly how it just looks like inside of the div, just like a display block. Now I'm going to first of all control / activate it, then come here and display grid, control /. Then I'm going to refresh, and it pulls it down basically. So nothing is being done here until when I activate the grid template columns code, control /, which basically it arranges these things and says let it be 4x4 for one fraction. So it just repeats this cycle until all of the elements have finished. So this is exactly what it does, like this. See, first 4, 1 2 3 4, one fraction, then another 1 2, but since there's no more, it leaves these spaces blank. So this grid is usually used just to help make the website look neat. And then we now go to the gaps to give them their space. Again, click here, control / and control /, everything reset, refresh, and there's now spaces in between every single one of them, making it look beautiful. Now, if we're going straight into this, we are now going to dive into CSS positioning. This is everything you need right now. So already inside, I already created the elements to name them like static, sticky, absolute, and even at the bottom here, fixed. Yes, So how are we able to do all this? Let's start with the static. Now in the static right here, first of all, we already gave the attribute, class attribute to this static element right here in the HTML file. We gave it a color, background color, which is this blue, and then the position static. What does that mean? The static is basically like default setting, meaning when you scroll, it follows it remains where it is, but it scrolls along with the page. Now the next one, the element sticky. Now you have already noticed the sticky. The first thing you saw when you saw me open this, it basically does this. It still remains on the page even while scrolling. This is very useful in website, especially when you want to keep the most efficient, most important information of the website without it scrolling past them, so people can know where next to go after they have viewed everything they want to view on the website. Like, let's say they want to go to the home, the services, products, and the other bunch of lists that you might need when you are just viewing a website. So this sticky does this particular thing right here. So the sticky, the sticky basically does that. So I change it the top to 10 pixels, meaning once you scroll past, it gives a 10 pixels space and then continues. The space is constant along the entire website. And now we now have the fixed. The fixed is like the sticky, but it's different. It's just fixed. Even if you scroll, it doesn't move. It doesn't really feel like this particular one feels like it kind of moves, especially when you come down to the beginning. It shifted down to its original position. It's only when you move that it remains there without changing any position. But this fixed is just static. It's just there, but it never actually moves along with the screen. It doesn't follow the flow. It's just on top of the entire website, so it doesn't respect the flow of the website. Then we now have relative. So if I can go back to the 5 HTML file right here, so in the 5 element we have the relative. Now let me go to the CSS and see. We provided a class attribute of box to it, so I'm going to go to the one we named the box, which is right above here. That is the box, that is the relative. Now the relative right here, you see this box like thing right here. When you apply a position of relative, it means the element which is inside of a parent. Mind you, most of this display properties, this display property respects its rules when it is within a parent. Like all of this position, yes, all of this position respects the rules only if they are linked to a parent. They must be children inside of a parent element. So a relative basically, it just ensures that the elements remain within the space of a parent. It remains within the space of a parent. This will be very, very useful if you just want something to remain in one space rather than being all over the place, so that it remains just there. And then we now have the absolute position. Now what is the absolute position? Right here, let me go back to that note. So the absolute in the CSS positions, the absolute just basically means an element with position absolute is positioned relative to a nearest position ancestor instead of positioned relative to the viewport like fixed. However, if an absolute position element has no position ancestors, it uses the document body and moves along with the page scrolling. So yeah, the absolute is kind of like relative. It's kind of like relative. That's basically what it is. Let me go back to the code and see exactly which parts I added it. The absolute position. Let me change the color so I can easily identify what I'm referring to, and then just make this green. I can't really see it anywhere. I don't know if it's visible. So it's top right. Let me refresh. Yes. So the absolute is basically like the relative. Yeah, it's basically like the relative. So that is I think that is all of the positions for now. Now when it comes to this image section, how do we apply the image? So now the elements, let's say we want to apply this image in the HTML file. We already have some elements and some of them with their respective class attributes. So in the CSS, the part where we added was this dot container class attribute. So let me show you exactly where the dot container class attribute, which is right here in this div, which we said hello right here. That's why this text technically appears there. So now I'll go into the CSS. This is the line of code we wrote. First of all, we wrote the height of that div to be 100 display value height, that is of your whole screen. Like when you scroll here right now on this particular page, it technically fills the whole screen. Then I change the background color to red, then I later change it to brown. So when it comes to coding, it is the next code you write in CSS, at least the next code you write overwrites the previous one. Let's say like background color was originally red, then I change it to brown, it automatically overwrites the red code. Then I added an opacity which overrode the background color of brown, and then I apply this background image by putting this background image column space URL inside the bracket. I linked it to an image in the folder images. That's hence this. Now why did I apply this dot? Because sometimes VS Code doesn't give you the shortcut directly, because when you type code, if you notice, whenever I type code, you notice that there are usually some shortcuts that appear whenever I'm typing. So when I was typing, the shortcuts didn't appear, so I applied this dot. Before the dot, it was double column, then dot slash, then I type image, and then the thing automatically gave me the shortcuts, and I selected, and then automatically linked it, and that's hence this picture brought. Now whenever you link it, there's something it usually does. It repeats the picture, because sometimes the picture can be too small for the heights basically. So when it's too small, it automatically repeats the picture to fill up the whole space. Now I put background repeat space no repeat, so that the thing can just be one picture. Background position to be center, so that the thing can come to the center, and then background size to cover, so that it can cover the whole website. So if your picture is of low quality, or in other words is, let's say, in portrait, it won't really respond well with your particular website. It might just appear way too low resolution right there. It might appear too much of a low resolution. So you have to be careful what images you use and how you write the setting code to make them function. Now the opacity is just basically this. I already explained that the text was inside of that div that has this class attribute of container. That's why it's right here. So the opacity basically goes on top of the image. So when you're doing opacity, you have to be careful which picture you want that opacity to show. Now I created another div element similar to this one, and also gave it the same 100 display value height. And then how did I give it this color? The first one, I gave it linear. So let me show you how the linear looks like. So I'm going to comment this one out and then refresh it. So this is how the linear looks like. There's two colors right here. If you notice, kind of orange, and this one is kind of, is it pinkish? And you know, like you can just see different shades of colors right here. So linear just means like straight line. So there's something else he mentioned. You can change, you know, the degree position, like 90 degrees, 45 degrees angle, basically from the top to the bottom. That's this straight line right here that is demarcating it the way it is. If you can notice the shade, maybe I'll choose another color to make it a bit more obvious. So I'm going to select this, go to green, and then refresh. Yes, now this is so much like it. You can add multiple colors due to this linear gradient, multiple colors into this image. So if, let's say, you don't have a picture for the website, or you know, you just want the website to not be so full of pictures, but just have a certain theme, you can just use this linear gradient. If you'd like, change the degree position like this, degree comma space, the first color comma space, the second color, and so on, just like that. Then the radial gradient, let me restore this. So now the radial gradient is circle basically. So yeah, it is just like linear except it's circle, and you can't add the degree to it, hence it's a circle. So it is what it is. And yeah, with that is basically how all this came together. As you can see, it's kind of already given, yes, this could be a website. I just need to tweak some things, design it a little bit, and then voila, it become a website. Maybe I'll show you guys the assignment I did. So let's come right here. Let me open with live server so to be faster. Yes, now this is the assignment that I did. So I apply some of the principles from the previous videos, you know, the border radius, hover that changes the color of this. Now this is not a button. Turns out that hover doesn't only work on buttons. You can work on literally any single element on the screen. You just have to make it make sense so that it will not just appear off and not making sense. You can even apply it to this whole body. You can apply it to literally anything, the hover or the active. to literally anybody. So this right here, this ChatGPT, is a button. So when I click on it, it's like this. I also learned something extra, how you can add what type of cursor is what. Like, notice as I come here, it changes to this. Then when I come here, it becomes this. Same thing with here, it becomes this. Now that'll be very, very useful, especially if you want, you know, a website to not just be responsive in terms of when it's on different screen sizes, but responsive in terms of when actions are being taken, so that it doesn't look like, imagine if everything I touch it just look like this particular arrow. It's not that bad, but there is just a difference in when it changes. This is when you come here, people know, okay, this is a button, so I click on it. When it comes to you want to change, you know, I'm like, when I go to the CSS now and I want to change a color, I come here, and when I move here, it changes to this, and when I start moving, it changes to another icon, basically. So yes, that is the assignment, and that's all for today's video. So if you are also on a journey with me and into, you know, engineering, software, being a developer generally, please, I would encourage you to subscribe, like this video. I will encourage you to also share this video to motivate people around you. And this is Silent Developer, the progress without the noise.